She didn't know it at the time, but what you're watching here would be the last night of 19-year-old Maple Batalia's life. She spent her final few hours being the girl everyone knew her to be. Happy, bubbly, laughing, while studying with her friends at the Simon Fraser University campus in Surrey, British Columbia. But that night, someone else was watching her.
What's your emergency, sir?
I just heard gunshots.
Okay, how many did you hear?
At least 7 in confession.
At 1:04 a.m., the police department began receiving a flood of calls.
Hi there, what's your emergency?
I just wanted to report that I heard about 5 gunshots.
What's your emergency, sir?
I just heard gunshots.
Dozens of concerned witnesses reported hearing gunfire coming from the parking lot at Simon Fraser University.
Shots fired. Multiple calls on this.
It wasn't clear if a suspect or multiple suspects were still on site, but Sergeant Kevin Jeffrey, one of the first officers on the scene, immediately made his way to the 3rd floor of the university's parking area.
We quickly located a female who was between 2 vehicles. There was a lot of blood around her. Had been shot 3 times, and she also sustained multiple stab wounds to the back of her head. There was hundreds of media.
It was a horrifying scene, one that suggested the worst. But against all odds, the young university student was still alive, though barely, and in critical need of medical care. As paramedics raced to get her to the nearest hospital, detectives began to sweep the crime scene for evidence. One of the weapons was quickly recovered, a large knife covered in blood but carefully cleaned of any fingerprints. A single bullet casing was also found nearby, though the firearm itself had vanished. Close to where the victim lay, investigators located her wallet and ID.
I may have a name for the female here. The 2 I've got here know her.
Go with it.
Surname is Batalia, unknown spelling, given one of Maple. She's gonna be about 19.
Later that evening, the tragic news was confirmed. At 9:07 p.m., doctors in the ICU pronounced a 19-year-old Maple Batalia dead.
Maple's father and mother, sister, and a family friend were in the waiting room. My sergeant said those words that every cop hates saying. "I'm sorry I have to tell you, but your daughter is dead." Maple's mother grabbed the back of my head and pulled me down so that our foreheads were touching. And she screamed in my face, "Bring me vengeance."
The announcement left her family shattered. The loss of their daughter came as an unimaginable shock.
That was the worst day of my life. I couldn't take it. I'm sorry.
We felt as if we've lost everything, and I've lost the most precious jewel of my life.
Maple was a straight-A student, completely dedicated to studying the sciences. Her goal was to become a doctor, but that wasn't her only passion. Maple also loved acting. Though her future plans focused on medicine, her dreams were always pulled towards the world of performance. By 19, she already had some experience in the industry. At 17, she starred in a commercial for a coffee shop inside a pharmacy. And at 19, she landed a small part in the TV show The Secret Circle, which featured her first on-screen kiss.
Back to the gym.
At 19, Maple also played the role of Melissa in the teen comedy Diary of a Wimpy Kid. She had dreams, big ones, that were only just beginning to take shape. But tragically, they would never have the chance to come true. Now it was up to the police to uncover the truth and give her grieving family the answers they deserved. As the investigation began, Sergeant Kevin Jeffrey noticed several surveillance cameras positioned around the parking lot. The university's security team handed over the footage, and officers immediately began reviewing it. Sergeant Adam McIntosh, a specialist in audio and video analysis, joined the investigation. The detectives placed enormous hope in those recordings, believing they could significantly impact the direction of the investigation. Initially, the police needed to determine exactly when Maple arrived at the university. They began by reviewing footage from a camera monitoring the library entrance. They scanned the video up until about 9:30 p.m., expecting to see her around that time. Maple was dressed in a dark top and white sandals, so she should have been easy to spot. However, even at that late hour, the university was still a hive of activity, making it difficult to sort through all the people on the footage. The more faces there were, the more the investigators had to identify. To their surprise, Maple didn't appear anywhere on the tape. This unexpected finding threw the detectives off balance and forced them to broaden their search. They switched to a camera covering the route from the parking lot to the library. At 10:22 p.m., two dark-haired girls were seen walking toward the elevator. The girl on the left, wearing a dark jacket and white sandals, looked like Maple, but the police couldn't confirm her identity for sure. The blurry video wasn't enough evidence, so the investigation had to continue. Detectives needed to find out where the girls were headed next, so they moved to a camera inside the library. There was no doubt it was definitely her. The footage showed her clearly happy, laughing and having a good time. Catching Maple on the footage gave the police a chance to search for any clues that could point to the killer. But suddenly, the camera swung away, and neither Maple nor her friend was in sight anymore. It seemed as if someone had intentionally turned the camera, leaving the investigators with nothing to go on. Desperate for another angle, the detectives switched to a camera monitoring the library exit. At 1:01 a.m., a slim brunette appeared on screen, accompanied by three young men. They walked calmly together until they vanished from view. The detectives moved on to the next camera, which covered the path leading to the parking lot. Just 2 minutes later, Maple's life would be tragically cut short, and the investigators hoped this footage might reveal the identity of her attacker. The group was seen making their way toward the parking area, with Maple heading down the stairs and the three young men following close behind. The following camera showed them exiting the university building onto the parking lot. Maple and the three guys walked through the doors, but after that, their destination became unknown. The investigators needed a different angle. A street camera overlooking the parking lot had a clear line of sight. Yet, just as Maple and the three young men were about to enter the frame, the camera suddenly zoomed out and began shifting its focus. The detectives were left frustrated, feeling as though the killer had somehow anticipated their every move and outsmarted the surveillance. But it turned out to be much simpler. The camera's movements were automated, part of preset routines common to nearly all university cameras, with no one manually controlling them. It was simply an unlucky coincidence.
To see that camera turn away at the moment it most needed to be there was one of the most frustrating things to watch in this investigation.
By the time the camera finally swung back toward the parking lot, it was already 1:04 a.m., and somewhere off-screen, Maple Batalia was already lying there, dying. Sergeant Jeffrey had lost the chance to track her final steps to her car. Whatever had happened after she left the building was now a mystery, and any visual clue that might have helped was gone. With the trail growing cold, the investigation had to change direction. One of the young men seen in the footage was identified as Diltaj Dillon, a longtime friend of Maple's from high school. Since he was among the last people to see her alive, speaking to him became a top priority. There were still many missing pieces, and the investigators needed to start putting them together quickly. There were nearly 100 security cameras spread across campus, with 32 positioned in the parking lot alone. That meant around 660 hours of footage to comb through. While Detective Adam McIntosh stayed to continue reviewing the videos, Sergeant Jeffrey set out to locate Diltaj Dillon. It didn't take long to find him. They located the young man quickly and brought him into the police station for questioning.
Okay, what time did you guys leave?
He told us that he was studying with Maple earlier on, and they had left shortly after 1 o'clock.
Investigators asked him to walk them through exactly what happened after the group made their way down the stairs toward the parking area.
What happened then? Did you follow her to her car? No.
Dillon told investigators that once they reached the parking lot, the group split up.
I left with the guys and she went another way.
He said Maple headed straight for her car. He also shared something he thought might be important.
Dillon also told us that he was involved in an incident a few days beforehand with another person that knew Maple.
Me and Maple were having a coffee, and this guy came in. He was upset with Maple, and he took a swing at me.
It was a promising lead, and detectives needed to follow up to learn more. At this stage, Dillon didn't seem directly connected to the crime, but it was still too soon to determine whether he was just a witness or potentially more than that. Following the ambiguous interview with Dylan, investigators expanded their efforts, combing through footage from cameras outside the campus, hoping for any kind of lead. Eventually, the extra manpower paid off. An eagle-eyed officer spotted something suspicious. On one of the recordings, a white sports car was seen speeding away from the area at a dangerously high speed. The vehicle was caught on camera at precisely 1:04 a.m., the same moment the 911 call came in. When the footage was paused, the car was identified as a Dodge, but due to the speed it was going, the license plate was too blurry to make out. Sergeant Jeffrey went back to the university parking lot footage, and at 8:07 p.m., 5 hours before Maple was shot, he spotted a similar silhouette. It was the white Dodge Charger. The local community was deeply shaken by Maple's death. Residents came together to support the Batalia family, holding several gatherings and public memorial services in her honor.
There were surprisingly a lot of people showed up. People from all religions, all castes, all creeds, they were present there.
Overwhelming grief takes over as 800 family, friends, and strangers packed into Riverside Funeral Home to honor the short life of 19-year-old Maple Batalia.
They had dressed her in this outfit that she had jokingly said to her mom that she wanted to get married in. So her mom purchased the outfit, and they had her dressed in that beautiful dress.
On the funeral, I saw his hair like this stitching. I think, why they are stitching here? 11 times he put a knife in her head. He's a butcher.
The investigation picked up pace as a team of experts combed through hours of footage, trying to follow the white Dodge Charger throughout the day. Finally, they caught a crucial glimpse. At 10:08 p.m., a camera covering the route from the parking lot to the library captured the same white Dodge sliding into view. Just 14 minutes later, Maple and her friend appeared, heading toward the elevator. This gave detectives a new theory.
Who's ever in that white Dodge Charger is clearly hunting Maple without her having any idea what's happening. We're thinking the killer's inside that car.
From that point on, all the resources were focused on identifying who had been inside the car. Police began tracking every white Dodge Charger registered in the county.
We quickly learned there was very few of those vehicles registered in the province of British Columbia.
The bulk of the Dodge Chargers at that time were rental vehicles. We then reached out to those rental agencies to find out which ones were rented at the time of this offense took place.
Detectives contacted rental agencies to identify which vehicles had been rented on the day of the crime. When they compared this information with Maple's circle of friends and classmates, no connections appeared. However, soon after, they discovered the name Gursamar Betty, not a friend or classmate of Maple's, but still a student at Simon Fraser University. This presented the police with a promising lead, though they needed definitive proof that Betty had actually rented the car. Luckily, Avis had extensive security camera coverage, offering crucial footage that could confirm this. According to their records, the Dodge Charger was rented on September 25th at 10:30 a.m., a day and a half before the attack. They reviewed the footage from 10:19 a.m., and 13 minutes later at 10:32, two young men entered the rental office. The first one, who approached the counter, matched the description of Gursamar Betty, but he wasn't alone.
The other male with him is a South Asian male, approximately 20 years old.
Investigators switched to footage from an exterior camera overlooking the parking lot. It captured two young men waiting as their rental car was brought around. Moments later, Betty got behind the wheel and drove off. This confirmed their lead. Betty was indeed the one who rented the car. Now the task was to identify the second man. That didn't take long. He had a criminal history, and one of the officers at the station recognized him right away. His name was Gary Dhaliwal. As it turned out, Maple had known Dhaliwal. In fact, he was her ex-boyfriend. That connection immediately raised red flags. Still, investigators needed more background, so Sergeant Jeffrey paid another visit to Maple's family to learn more.
When I first met him, I felt like he was a good for Maple, but then he cheated on Maple, so Maple had a reason to break up with him, and he just couldn't get that in his head.
If what Maple's cousin had said about Dhaliwal was true, then jealousy could easily have been his motive. Still, Sergeant Jeffrey had another lead to follow. He obtained surveillance footage from the Tim Hortons cafe, an incident Maple's friend Dylan had mentioned during questioning. At 3:53 a.m., a young man and woman entered the cafe. At first, their faces were partially blocked by other customers, making them hard to identify. But a few moments later, investigators got a clear shot. It was Maple and Diltaj Dylan. They made their way to a table near the entrance. Not long after, another man walked in and headed straight toward them. Investigators immediately recognized him. It was Gary Dhaliwal, Maple's ex-boyfriend. Out of nowhere, Gary took a swing at Dylan. A few moments later, the footage showed Maple escorting Dhaliwal out to the parking lot. She climbed into his car and they drove away together.
That footage actually shows us an insight to what's going on in that relationship. I'm seeing a jealous ex-boyfriend only days before Maple's life is taken from her.
Maple tells me the next day she was truly, truly shaken up. And I was like, Maple, this is so scary. You need to go and get a restraining order.
At this point, detectives were certain that Gary Dhaliwal was the man behind Maple Batalia's murder. His reputation for jealousy and possessiveness only added weight to the suspicion, and the surveillance footage linked him directly to the white Dodge Charger seen speeding away from the crime scene. But it still wasn't enough to press charges. Hoping to get a breakthrough, investigators brought in his suspected accomplice, Gursimar Bedi, for questioning. They were counting on him to turn on his friend.
You know why we brought you in today? We got you and Dhaliwal renting the car, and we have you following her everywhere she goes.
But Bedi stayed silent, refusing to share his side of the story.
All right. Don't say we didn't try to do you a favor.
Just when it seemed like Dhaliwal and Bedi might get away with the murder, forensic experts examining the car delivered a crucial breakthrough. A spent shell casing was found under the hood of the white Dodge, and tests confirmed it matched the caliber of the bullet that killed Maple. Whoever took Maple's life had been in that car.
We begin with news. Family and friends of a 19-year-old Surrey woman have been waiting for more than a year. 2 men have been arrested in connection with the murder of Maple Batalia.
Gary Dhaliwal and Gursimar Bedi were taken into custody, and on the very first day of the hearing, Dhaliwal admitted the crime, providing a full account of the attack. Unable to come to terms with their breakup, Dhaliwal was overwhelmed by jealousy, convinced that Maple was seeing someone else. He viewed her as his possession, someone who belonged to him alone. Fueled by rage, he purchased a gun and a knife, then asked Bedi to rent a car on his behalf. Using the rented vehicle, Dhaliwal tracked Maple's movements, dropping Bedi off near Simon Fraser University before parking and waiting. Bedi informed him that Maple had gone to the university library, and Dhaliwal waited for her there for the next 4 hours. At 1:02 a.m., Maple stepped out of the building with a group of friends, including Diltaj Dylan, the same young man Dhaliwal had assaulted just days before. This only fueled Dhaliwal's rage. He waited until Maple was alone in a blind spot of the parking lot, out of the camera's view, and that's when he struck. To be certain, he stabbed the defenseless girl in the back of the head. On December 1st, 2012, Gursimar Bedi was convicted of being an accomplice and was sentenced to 22 months in prison.
We don't believe Bedi knew in advance that Dhaliwal was going to kill her. Bedi was simply his eyes and ears, an accomplice to the stalking.
Gary Dhaliwal was initially given a life sentence without the possibility of parole, the toughest punishment in British Columbia. However, on March 3rd, 2016, his conviction was reduced to second-degree murder, making him eligible for parole after 21 years.
It was major disappointment to my family and me.
Why this is second degree? Why he has a parole after 21 years? No.
Maple's death, it shook up the whole family. I miss everything about Maple.
This isn't an easy day for us. It's very bittersweet. We were just so proud of her. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her how much I love her.
The pain never goes. You know, people say justice brings peace, but it doesn't, because Maple's still not here.